Grab some show merch and support my work on cults through 2024. New digital original drawings by me are related to surviving a cult or sunshine, positivity, and reggae. Find the link at frankietees.substack.com and look for the word tease, T-E-E-S.
The Frankie Files.
Hi, I'm Frankie Tees. As a writer and survivor of SA and CSA, I'm here to report on the story of Cathy O'Brien, one MKUltra victim. Her 3 books and her documentary will be the topic of Season 3 of Frankie Files Podcast. Find out more at frankiefilespodcast.com.
Trigger warning.
Some people may find topics discussed in this episode difficult. Please proceed with caution. Welcome, Frankie Files Podcast. Welcome to the world of Cult Kids. Welcome to Frankie Files Podcast, episode 96. I'm Frankie Tees, and today I'll be covering chapter 2 to 5 of the book Access Denied for Reasons of National Security. The documented journey from CIA mind control slave to successful U.S. government whistleblower by Cathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips. As we continue now from Mark's brilliant removal of Cathy and Kelly from the grips of senators gone mad and all the handlers involved, Mark successfully gets Cathy a divorce with help from friends. Awarded very little in settlement but freedom, she starts a life with her rescuer, Mark Phillips. These pages next are of great interest to me. The level of amnesia has clouded Cathy O'Brien's memory so greatly, years of electrocution and other awful things, trauma, the main thing, that she's literally unable to remember that her father is abusive from birth. Oh, it's already time to pause so early in the show. This is the part everyone has trouble grasping, and I include myself, though a victim of this type of programming from an Italian madwoman who was too smart for her own good in my occult experience. How can memory be hidden by the brain? That's what Cathy and Mark really bring to us as survivors of traumatic amnesia. Why does the memory come back? A question I started asking in 2022 as it was slowly returning to me. But that really hit me at age 30 plus. And according to Cathy in PTSD Time to Heal, with lots of book references noted, memory starts to return after age 30 when the neurons in the brain open up as a part of aging. In addition, a shock to your brain can also dislodge memory. Those of you dealing with a lot of amnesia know about this like I do. It's such a nagging feeling not knowing your full past, like most people do. The missing time. The amnesia is real. Let's get into the excerpt. First, from chapter 2 of Access Denied. Mark begins talking to Cathy as they are traveling, and her urge to talk about her memories are now flooding her brain, and they're overwhelming and have the emotion attached. Mark forbids it and explains. Write it out, Mark instructed. I don't want to hear about it. I want to read about it, where I can understand it. It may feel as though you've already told me about this, but you haven't, nor will you. Verbalizing events in the past only reinforces it into your own mind and can further traumatize you. Wow. It takes the logic portion of the brain to move a pen. Therefore, when you write out memory, it shifts the emotionally incomprehensible over to logic, making it comprehensible. Mark continues, once it is comprehensible, you can deal with the reality of your past in a logical manner. Quote, I pondered his statement. She says, it doesn't seem logical that when I see my past, it's as though I were viewing it from above. It is as if my spirit took flight to a safe, loving space while my body was being used and abused, end quote. And he replies, severe torture and trauma does affect people this way. Simply shift this natural perspective to a mind's screen, movie screen. You already survived it once. There is no sense in you reliving it. It's your memory and you already know it. View your mind's screen through the eyes of the part of you that endured it. Smell the smells, then write it out. That's why I said the pen is mightier than the sword, Mark concluded. Cathy says, I wrote a brief line that Cox was an occult serial killer. Mark glanced over at what I had written as he merged onto the freeway. Suppressing his own horror, he nonchalantly asked, How do you know this? Quote, I saw, Mark interrupted me, reminding me to write it out. And then later, Mark took a notepad and drew an illustration for me of a pie graph. As he drew the circle, he said, Imagine this as your brain. It compartmentalized this ritual event, for example. He drew the first section into the pie graph and pointed out all the rest of the area that was left to function normally, while ignoring the event compartmentalized in the wedge. He sectioned off more and more wedges, describing how my brain was comprised of as many compartments as there had been traumatic experiences in my life. And that is very interesting and hard to comprehend for us, but each time we are traumatized, a new compartment is made. And this is what the government learned would be a good place to store secrets because we can't bring it to mind due to the amnesic trauma response of the brain. Later, they go to Las Vegas to get married. It was a combination of love and practicality. When he is in Las Vegas, Mark has an encounter with some of his operative friends, and they say, save yourself and get away from the woman, which he hears continuously as he's trying to help Cathy. Cathy says, when he needed his friends, they were only there long enough to advise him to abandon me and his quest for answers. More determined than ever, Mark chose to learn the truth and keep Kelly and me alive. So he drove on in silence, while Kelly loudly and irrationally displayed her traumatized state by crying, yelling, babbling, and laughing hysterically. Quote, truth naturally frees you from fear, Mark said. Think about it. Focus on what you know, rather than jump to emotionally driven conclusions. This next one's going on a t-shirt. Deprogram the program first. Find the beginning and end. What happened before and after? Set the written out scrap of memory aside for 3 weeks. Truth doesn't go away. Filling in the blanks with what might have happened will, end quote. This is tremendous truth about the mind, and I'm literally doing the process now, and we'll discuss that at the end of the season. Get the book PTSD, Time to Heal, link in the show notes. Next, after Cathy and Kelly and Mark arrive at a new place in remote parts of Alaska, Cathy details their arrival and the atmosphere. She's desperately trying to help Kelly with care for what they did to her brain. We'll get into details in a minute. Those reading the book, spoilers are going through chapter 5 today. Files Podcast. Welcome to the world of Cool Kids. Trigger warning, please make sure there are no people under 21 in the area. Thank you for doing that. Another excerpt. Cathy says, I went with her as she complied with the gynecological exam at the age of 8. Dr. Lillibridge examined and photographed what he termed, quote, the physical scars from years of extreme, horrendous sexual abuse. Cathy's continuing her memory process and coming out of amnesia by writing now. Cathy says, soon my father's sexual abuse extended into child pornography. Bonnie and the Boxer was the pornographic bestiality film made of me, she says, that would change my life forever. Looking through the eyes of the child I was when those events occurred, I recalled how much Uncle Sam's boxer dog, Buster, was so much bigger than me. My father had filmed the event and apparently sold it through the local Michigan Mafia child pornography ring. As I recalled, my maternal grandfather, Masonic Lodge, was instrumental in bringing businessmen, police, and politicians into our lives. She discusses the guy who got her into MK Ultra later. Uncle Bob was Air Force intelligence, a professed Jesuit, and friends with both Ford and another local politician, Guy Vanderyacht. Guy Vanderyacht went on to head the Republican National Committee while serving as a U.S. congressman. Some of you know, Vanderyacht was also involved in her career in the White House, her enslaved career, so you probably remember that name. Heading to Chapter 4. We're getting into a really hot topic and actually how it's carried out. Mark Phillips had studied mind sciences in the CIA for years, including primate behavior and the brain and trauma. This was because he was traumatized before age 5 or 7 when his mother, riding a horse with him, fell and the horse stepped on her and had become mute from the event. So it was very traumatic. The mother lived. The largest message Mark Phillips has brought, rest in peace, Mark, once discovering that mind control was being used by our U.S. corrupt portion of the government to enslave women and men generationally, like Cathy and Kelly, he later lectured with Cathy. Find those on YouTube all throughout his life. Learning about the brain is the real answer for those of us dealing with traumatic experiences and cults. Writing out our trauma, not repetitively talking and locking a wrong memory in. That's the exact opposite of what the entire psych industry tells us to do. Mark reveals that the ways to treat dissociative disorder have been withheld from all those professionals so the government can freely use trauma-based mind control, which causes dissociative disorder and makes people insane. Quote, free press and the courts were ignoring the widespread proliferation of incest, ritual abuse, and mind control. Information on dissociative disorders, trauma, and mind control had been deliberately suppressed from the American Psychiatric and Psychological Associations for so-called reasons of national security. The founder of the APA, Dr. Ewan Cameron, had been caught using CIA mind control methods at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, Canada. Continuing with the quote from Mark Phillips, educational institutions for mental health professionals lacked the facts necessary for treating the vast number of victims, survivors, filling their offices in search of help and understanding. Cathy O'Brien says, after being sold into MK Ultra mind control by my father, he was immediately flown to Boston, Massachusetts, where he said he was given instructions at the nearby Scientific Engineering Institute on how to raise me in the project. Perhaps it was my Uncle Bob's Jesuit affiliation, or perhaps it was due to the CIA combining Nazi mind sciences with what the Catholics learned through the Spanish Inquisition and Crusades regarding the effects of trauma on the human mind that sent my father to Boston. She says, regardless, when he returned, my MK Ultra mind control victimization commenced, beginning with mind-shattering occult rituals in my hometown, St. Francis de Sales Catholic Church. Cathy continues, it was on Mackinac Island that I first met U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd, who would become my owner in MK Ultra. As my owner, Senator Byrd directed my activities, deciding which military and NASA installations I would be taken to for mind control programming, who I would be prostituted to, and which government operations I would ultimately be used in during the Reagan-Bush administration. The pieces of my mind were fusing.
The Frankie Files.
Cathy is dealing with something I'm familiar with, having been guided what to do and think every minute without choice, appointments, a budget, a bed, or 2 nickels to rub together. I'm familiar with this level of control, not with the robotic missions internationally. but with the level of control. Every move and decision was not mine after age 12. I was always given instructions. It's not something some people are familiar with. It's called mind control. Cathy says she was having trouble buying dinner fixins at the store. Quote, I know this sounds crazy, but I can't decide. It's like my brain goes off into a black hole before I can think to decide. End quote. I was alarmed, she says. And if you're familiar with this, it can be debilitating because you've been programmed that all your answers have to come from the master. And in her case, her owner/handlers. That programming was severe and it was traumatic. And the brain listened. Things can randomly get you at any time. I would have to mask this because I didn't understand what was happening. Mark started the engine. The people who hurt you and Kelly may have intelligence, Mark told me, but they lack wisdom. They're flat thinkers with no concept of the strength of the human spirit or the power of a mother's love. There is no depth to their criminal minds, which is why wisdom outthinks a criminal mind every time. I settled into my seat, pulled out one of my ever-present notebooks, and began writing out details of the vast information I was remembering. My traumatic experiences with Wayne Cox and his Louisiana backwoods witchcraft blood rituals left me primed for occult theme mind control programming. Byrd ordered that this be instilled by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, founder of the occult Temple of Set, proliferating on U.S. military bases. Aquino seemed untouchable in those days, with professional neo-Nazi criminal activity covered by his affiliation with the War College's Psychological Warfare Division. The Catholic Jesuits, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution that ensures, quote, freedom of religion, and through his association with influential politicians such as Senator Byrd. And it's truly the laws regarding freedom of religion shape and shield the trafficking that goes on. Absolute corruption in this way, as Cathy calls it, the criminal justice system. She says, I was programmed for CIA black budget funding operations to deliver messages to and from various government leaders and fulfill sexual perversion in the process. Continuing, Kelly experienced classified high-tech harmonic mind control programming since birth. Where my brain was compartmentalized through trauma, her neuron pathways were harmonically vibrated for more precise compartmentalization.
You're listening to The Frankie Files. FrankieFilesPodcast.com.
Aquino was much more adept at playing devil's advocate, wielding his stun gun as the power of Satan for programming purposes than he was with harmonic equipment. Nevertheless, Aquino had supposedly established himself at both mind control epicenters, having used harmonic equipment to fine-tune the singing qualities of the country music entertainers Byrd controlled. And breaking from the quote, we talked earlier in episodes about the power of harmonics. In last episode, when I did an excerpt of This Is Your Brain on Music, it's a really good one for the history. Knowledge of the Catholic Church is combined with this, as Cathy describes in her other works. Look into the pipe organs, how they set the tuning for the world. The Catholic Church decided what the A note is, 440 hertz, I believe it is. Before they did that, again, this is Your Brain on Music, before the Catholic Church, way back when, set the A frequency at 440 hertz, everyone tuned differently. And they had made the case that if we don't do this, people will all be tuned, symphonies will all be tuned to the wrong note, and we can't play together. They created the sound we're using today, and people say it is corrupt. Very fascinating stuff. Okay, another excerpt. Mark says, there is a place to run right at them, and you have no need to hide. Obviously, they do, or they wouldn't devote so much effort and money to cover up. Okay, officers named Bennett and Crabtree began looking into their case in Alaska. So we're back to where they're still in Alaska. We'd like to interview you first thing in the morning, they said. The interview went on for days while Bennett and Crabtree took notes on Byrd and Aquino's ties to NASA. They were aware of Huntsville's reliance on Byrd's Senate appropriations funds for their NASA operations, yet had no inside knowledge of mind control operations. I explained how Aquino used me in the training video How to Create a Mind Control Slave using a stun gun. That was filmed in Huntsville, and even provided details of local persons involved. One of the CIA's main players, Hank Cochran, is scheduled to appear at the Gold Rush. He's a singer and songwriter in the country music industry, I added. It all ties right back in to Senator Byrd again. Irby Mandrell, the girl's father, even bragged how Senator Byrd had them programmed and harmonically tuned right here in Huntsville. Again, there's so much to the sound factor in mind control, and we're finally getting to the bottom of that with Cathy O'Brien. I'm so glad to get this info. When I think about the control over the music industry to put out things that work with the agenda of the New World Order, it's kind of overwhelming. They started this in the 40s. I saw the infestation of Satanism into rap, just as an example, which has never stopped. 3-6 Mafia, okay? Great example. i.e. 666. Now, people seem to go in and out of satanic symbolism like it's nothing now, and it wasn't always that way. It's been normalized. What I've seen is a subtle long-term conditioning of the ideology of Satanism, and if you look into Silicon Valley, it's the norm there. It's rampant. Looking at the connection of Aquino and the Temple of Set in San Francisco area, the Shasta location, and the Bohemian Grove, all up there in the San Francisco area, it's an epicenter of the dark and dismal ideology. Believe what you want, but when it involves the blood of unwilling victims, rape of children, enslavement sexually of women, murder and selling body parts, you've lost it. It's not just about having your own ideology when you hurt other people. Sadly, the corrupt portion of our U.S. government are into the occult. They're running on it, and that's what's being exposed in the Cathy O'Brien story, whether we want to see it or not. So plainly and with witnesses. It's the cult of cults, and they have found too many ways to spread their ideology secretly, subconsciously, technologically, corporately, via occult secretism. We'll be seeing it illustrated more as Cathy tries to get her life back and that of her daughter. Thanks for listening to Frankie Files Podcast. And always keep critical thinking. Hi, I'm Frankie Tees. As a writer and survivor of SA and CSA, I'm here to report on the story of Cathy O'Brien, one MKUltra victim. Her 3 books and her documentary will be the topic of Season 3 of Frankie Files Podcast. Find out more at frankiefilespodcast.com.